I'm Terry Robinson, and I'm not from the Robinson families that lived in South Hero forever. I'm one of the new Robinsons, but I love having the name Robinson and living in South Hero. I am the president of the Historical Society, and we're excited that you're all here. We formed the Historical Society because we wanted to get people together that love South Hero history. And that's all we're about, is getting together and talking about South Hero history. And I want to introduce our board and our junior historians. I'll start with the junior historians. We have over here Erin Heslop. We have Paige Brownell. We have Scout Barbic. She's my granddaughter. She lives in Williston. And Lucas Pendolino. And my vice president, or our vice president, is Peg Clark, right here, and she's been in charge of the programs. If you have ideas and you want to talk to anybody, talk to Peg, because she's great at getting this all together. Sue Crowley is our treasurer, and Sue does have papers if you want to become a member. We do members from October to October. So people that joined last year, you know, it's carried till this October. And now we have membership cards that Dolph Wurzing is our secretary, and he made membership cards. And they're over.
There's a lot of them up here, so just pick them up. You don't have to pay it if you don't.
Yeah. It's $10 to join, and it helps defray some costs for CDs and videos, and we'd like actually to get our own camera sometime. This one is the school librarians, so little things like that. We don't need a lot of money, but there are some state things that we do need to have some money for. And Brett Corbin is a trustee, and Judy Duvall is a trustee, and Hazel Quelch. Is Hazel here? Oh, Hazel. Hi, Hazel. Hazel Quelch. And did I miss anybody? Brett and Judy and Hazel and Ken. And Ken, right there. Ken Rochelo. And what else do I need to say, Peg? Nothing. Oh, we meet every first Friday of the month. We've been trying to do. And in October, we'll have an annual meeting, which we just report on things. And we wanted to do potluck. It didn't work this year, but we'll see. We'll try. And I am going to give you Peg Clark right now, and she'll introduce our guests today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to emphasize that we like for people to join, but we welcome everybody to meetings, whether you're a member or not. Tonight we are really happy about this program because people have been asking about the farms for some time. And so we have Ray Allen, who needs no introduction. His family's been here forever.
Not yet.
And then we have Rod Larrow, and his family had the farm that is now known as Celia and Ron Hackett's farm. And we have Tim Maxim, who now has the big farm up on Route 2, but his father and mother farmed here long before, and he'll tell you a little about that history. So we'll just start off. Ray, you have a lot of things here. Would you tell us about some of them?
What do you think, Malcolm?
Get out of the way.
First off, this is my father, Ray R. Allen, born in 1890. Had 5 girls, my older sisters, and only one left, and that's Polly McBride, and she's just turned 96. This was newer times, and he was on a tractor that had rubber tires, and he had a corn chopper. I was going to touch just a little on apples, a little on hay, and a little on marketing. The, this is my father's pruning saw. That was the one he used right up till 1970 or a little after that. Changed the blade, but had the same saw for a very long time. The one of the things that they did, they had golden or Guernsey cattle, registered Guernsey cattle, a herd that my father had built over a long period of time. He's very active in lots of things. He was town treasurer, I think, for 20 some odd years. He was treasurer of the fire department for a number of years. He was active in agricultural organization, the founder, I understand, with Governor Aiken of the Vermont Tree Fruit Growers, Vermont Horticultural Society, president of that, president of Vermont Guernsey Breeders, very active in UVM affairs and alumni affairs, very active in the State Selective Service Board back when people were being drafted. A real gentleman. I'm marketing the milk, and I don't want to see any of these milk bottles go out. Most of these were given to me. I couldn't afford to buy them. This is the Dairy Department, Burlington, Vermont, UVM embossed milk bottle, and those are going for several $100s at this point. And then the brown colored UVM milk bottle, that's easier to read. One of the most famous ones is, this is Mansfield Dairy, Stowe, Vermont. If you're going up Route 100, they've got a shop, and they're now selling the 20th printing of dairy bottles. Mount Mansfield, and it has Mount Mansfield, Stowe, Vermont thrills me with a cow on skis on the milk bottle. And that original issue was worth several hundred as well. Then there's one here from Robert George. Steve George had, or Phil George, Steve George family had a dairy up in Barrie. And Phil has the pizza place. You get off the interstate, head Leonardo's. They've got 2 or 3 of them. These are Harley riders, so we showed up with a milk bottle from his farm when he saw these one day. And what we did was, we had a milk bottle filler, which I looked for today and I couldn't find. We've got 2 of them on the farm, but they're hid. You would take the milk bottle and use 2 hands for a filler, which would hold several gallons of milk, and you just set it on the top, and it would shut off automatically when the air was all gone. You just pick it up. And then my father also had a cream separator, and he would sell all the cream and all the milk and all the eggs to Camp Oshalega. Of course, this is before the days of any pasteurization. There are the only 2 samples by milk bottle caps. You can pass that around. And the way we ended up with a lot of different milk bottles was, for every bottle you took into the milk bottle exchange that was Hood's, Borden's, Ethan Allen Farms, or any other operating dairy, they would give you 2 bottles from discontinued dairies. And so we had close to 100, I guess. Nobody knew they were going to be collector's items. They should have sat on them instead of passing them out for two for one. So that's enough on the dairy business. The apple business, they were picking apples in 3-bushel barrels, and selected Vermont apples, grade A, minimum size, and they would have to write that on. Allen Farm, grown and packed by, and minimum volume 3 bushels. You would lay this on the barrel head, and I looked for the brush. The brush was about the size of a shaving brush, but the bristles were only 1/2 inch long and very stiff. And then there was a wooden bowl that would have charcoal in it, and you wet that, and then you would just stencil that on the top of every barrel. Then they went to wooden boxes, and they would put on with water glass, they paint the end of the box and put this on, and then use a rubber stamp to put the grade and variety and whatever. So those are wooden boxes. We can pass those both around. Okay. How many people can tell me what this is?
Is it cheating because I remember you telling me once?
Yeah, well, let's see if anybody,
Yeah, let's see if anybody else.
I didn't tell everybody. Anybody here that just knows what it is? You want to get your horse to go faster? No, what these are hoops for wooden apple barrels. And you would just take one and split it off, wrap it around, and tack it together. So these are the hoops for, become the hoops for apple barrels.
What kind of wood is it?
What kind of wood is that?
Hickory. How do you like that? Am I smart or what? Boy.
So did he make his own barrels?
I was looking, no, I don't know what it is. It's a fork that's made out of hickory.
What's the question?
Ray, what do they use for staves?
They would buy the staves, and they'd be all made, and the heads and the bottoms would all be fashioned, and they would all be identical, so that they put them together. They all came knocked down. They'd assemble them, fill them out in the orchard typically, and they would pick the apples into a half-bushel wooden basket, solid basket with a solid wooden rim around the top, a bale-type handle, then a big hook so you could hook it on your ladder or hook it on a tree limb. So you could pick with both hands to fill the basket and then carry the basket down and then take the apples out and put them in the barrel or box. And then, of course, now we use buckets. It's just strap on over your shoulders and you put the apples in, and then the canvas bottom is false so you can light it down and just let the apples out. So only get touched by hand once.
They told me to reel you in if you go on too long.
I could go on without the microphone if you want it, Rod. Speaking of Rod, I have to show my sincere appreciation and honor of the older gentleman in the group. Yeah, lots of respect because he's so old. I'm amazed he's still here today.
So am I.
Now, you go out to start up the snow blower and plow a path around the house, or you have to pay somebody in a truck and a plow to come in and do it. Used to be you get up and you wanted to go to the barn and you had one of those, some 3-foot drifts between it. There's a snow shovel. I was hoping to give you folks, by seeing some of this stuff, a little greater appreciation of what our ancestors did. I'll let you hold it, Rod. Please. This is called a scythe, wooden handle. Hang on.
What's this part called?
Snap. Is that okay? Honorable sir? And this blade is a brush blade. So if you're cutting burdocks or small brush and stuff, you use a very thick blade. A regular grass blade would be about that long and much narrower. I had the pleasure of
You look like the Grim Reaper.
this was when my father was running the farm, but when I'd come home from high school or college in the summertime, there were about 800 apple trees, and these were big trees, and you had to mow underneath every tree with a scythe. Hired man and I would get that pleasure when we weren't haying. Of course, you can't stand up on another tree because of the low branches. And And one thing you want to do is keep the blade sharp. So that's how you do that.
And what's that called you sharpen it with?
Sharpening.
No, whetstone.
Oh, whetstone.
It looked right.
So that's what they cut hay with, and they have a long blade. You go out in the hayfield, and you don't take the thing and pull it towards you, cutting a wide swath. You swing it so that you only go in about 4 to 6 inches with the tip. So they do a little swing at a time, and that leaves the hay all over, kind of in one spot. Tends to go that way. Then they got smart. This is a scythe with a cradle. So when you swing this to cut the grass, look out, Rod. When you swing with that, then the cradle picks up the hay and deposits all the hay in the windrow. Pretty ingenious, them Vermont farmers, right? And then you got to have a fork, and you take the windrow and you just build it up into a pile. Then you go on and do that. Then you come along with a team of horses and a wagon. They were nice, they'd stop when you told them to. And normally. Then you pick up the hay and you throw it up on the wagon. And then you take the wagon and you go up into the hay mound and you pitch the hay off. And so that was a simple, easy way to, that's the way you do it now, Tim, right?
So what year, Ray, would that be? What year would that be? About?
No, I don't know. They would use the size of the cradles, and that was probably up to the early 1900s, all the 1800s, 1700s, all be this type of stuff. That's one reason you would have very small dairy farms, because it'd be hard to put up enough hay to...
I think you kicked the plug out of the machine there.
Oh, yep, you did.
Just pulled it
Okay, so that's how they put up the apples. The apple barrels would go on ships and would go down the canal mostly to Boston, to New York City, and then would be shipped all over from there. And we were shipping wooden boxes, my father was. They would go down to cold storage in Albany, New York, and be sorted and sold down there in the wooden boxes. I think that's everything. Here you go, old man.
You know, I should ask somebody to remember back 70 years, more or less, when you can't even remember where he parked his car. We were warned about going overtime here. I shall repeat what I think it was George Jessel said about a presentation or a performance. It should, the duration of that presentation should never exceed the endurance of the human bladder. So I think I'll take you back. I won't stand up. It's not that easy anymore. I will keep my hat on. You can understand. Keeps certain body parts warm. I'll take you back to the early 40s so that not too many people can argue with what I say here. We lived at what is now 61 Landon Road in a little house. Across the road, Walter Pigeon lived, and Alan can probably tell you about spending winters in a house that's built up on piers or something with nothing underneath it. Walter was the school bus driver at that time. I think we had just acquired a brand new yellow school bus, which replaced what they used to call the school barge.
1939 Mac model EE.
I don't recall asking. Anyway, Walter was known to stop the bus and let small boys off several hundred yards from home to walk the rest of the way if they weren't behaving themselves. That's a fact. There were only 6 houses on that road at the time. The first one closest to South Street, which has undergone a remarkable transformation here in recent months. My Uncle Al and Aunt Celia lived there. George Pigeon lived essentially across from where we were. Walter must have rented the house up on the little shale ridge, and we lived across the street. There was a house down in the hollow where somebody here lives. That was the tenement house for the farm up on top where Pringles. And that's it, not for that road. There was no electricity on the road. There was a telephone line, 278R.
141.
And there were snow fences every winter all the way from about where Alden Dubuque's house was, all along that level spot about to where the first house on Landon Road is. Oh, what a wonderful place to build forts and dig tunnels and all that. It was a lot better than television at that time.
It didn't have an option.
Okay, as I said, there was no electricity or anything. Your water came from either a well or a cistern, which was in the cellar of this little house. I'll have to describe the little house somewhat. There was the usual stairway for a house of that vintage where the treads were quite narrow to upstairs, a small landing, then a large bedroom. At the foot of the stairs was the piano, and I'm not sure why we had it, because nobody played the piano. But I do remember on any number of occasions falling down those stairs and ricocheting off the piano. That may explain a thing or two. In the kitchen there was a wood stove, cook stove, which was provided a goodly amount of heat all winter and some delicious meals. Then in the summer there was a 3-burner kerosene pot burner, I guess you'd call it. And I still remember the smell of kerosene burning. I remember the smell of kerosene lamps. These are not my favorite smells. This house had a lot of memories because there were some wonderful sounds that went along with it. The rain on the tin roof. There was a frog pond down in back, and the frogs would sing you to sleep every night. And the little gas engine that ran the milk cooler would run on into the night until it ran out of gas. And I can still hear all those wonderful sounds. I have to mention the kitchen sink had a countertop with this isn't really farm related terribly, except it was a farm. Kitchen had a counter, linoleum covered counter with one of these cast iron sinks. It was about 6 inches deep and about 35 inches long and 18 or so inches wide, with a pump at one end, because the cistern was immediately underneath down in the cellar. And we small boys got to stand on that counter on bath night and negotiate for, in the tub, a little more hot water or a little more cold, it's too hot, or, until a certain kind lady got sick of it all and said, get in. But at the other end of the counter sat a kerosene lamp. Now, I know for a fact that if you back into it, I'm not so sure it's about scars on my backside, but scars on my psyche. I might carry those to this day. Now, the cellar was built, that's all ledge through that little ridge. The cellar had a bare ledge floor and an open top cistern. when you have an open top cistern, things fall in. Maybe why I'm so resistant to disease. They had to be
The rats
cleaned.
and mice and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
they got tired of swimming after a while. Had to be cleaned periodically and washed down with Clorox and all that. And in the winter, when it didn't rain, to run water down into the eaves troughs, into the cistern and all that, you got to borrow a sap collecting tank, go down to the lake, cut a hole in the ice, take buckets and fill the tank and go back up and empty it into the cistern if you wanted water. That took up a little bit of time.
Would you tell us about the beans? I hear that beans were a big thing for a lot of families here in the South End.
Beans, oh yeah, well, we'll get on to that in a minute, maybe, unless somebody pulls the cord here. Now, across the backyard, of course, was the outhouse and the chicken house. You know, this was a complete setup. And in the barn, and I seem to recall that there were probably no more than 10 or 12 cows in there. They all had to be milked by hand every morning. And my dad had his milk route where he picked up these wonderful cans full of milk, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So the cows had to be milked before he went off on this. And this road didn't get plowed very early because the town hired plow trucks from Russo Brothers, and South Arrow was not their top priority. Landon Road was even further down the priority list, to the extent that the school bus many mornings didn't come on the road. We had to walk up to South Street because the snow was too deep. But my father in his truck, I think he closed his eyes and let her rip. I'm not sure how he did that. And of course, the cellar was a wonderful place to store all the canned goods. Everything was canned. We had a big garden, beans, carrots, everything. Beets and carrots were mostly stored in big earthenware crocks filled full of sand. And I seem to remember that was my job to tend those things. And those things kept all through the winter on into the spring. Big garden, lots of blackberries across the street in the woods, back of George Pigeon's, what was George Pigeon's house. And I can tell you, if you run onto a wasp nest, those big gray things, even though your father says, stay away from that, you had to go hit it with a stick. Once. And we had a special treat every winter. My father, everybody who had a truck worked on filling the ice house up at the creamery, because the milk was cooled with ice. And we filled the ice house down at Camp Skyland. And to show his gratitude, Mr. Norton used to ship us a big bushel basket of Florida oranges, grapefruit, kumquats, what were the other things, tangerines, all that good stuff. Now, because there was no electricity, you had a battery radio. Now, today we turn things on and just leave them running all day. Well, we turned the radio on for Jack Armstrong, the Green Hornet, I Love a Mystery,
Harry and the Pirates.
oh yes, and Joe Louis, Billy Conn, heavyweight belts. That was a special night with a quart of Pepsi Cola and a big box of Cheez-Its. We could stay up late. And that was that. Now, in the barn, once the cows were milked, the milk had to be carried in the pail out the door and around the end of the barn, around the silo, and up into the milk house. This was very efficient. Where it was strained and all that and put in the cooler. And I can tell you about milk cans and coolers full of icy water. I got into that one summer later when my dad broke his foot. The cooler was a wonderful place to keep those glass gallon jugs of homemade root beer, though I might add. That was a special treat. And along about when I was 10 years old, more or less, I can't remember all this stuff, we got the orchard up where Ron Hackett is. And that was a whole new experience. There was a lot of room there to grow beans, which for some strange reason had to be hoed at least once every summer. And well, that's not a picture in the Islander of our field, but the field ran from the orchard all the way down to the woods. And you started at the top, and by the time you got back, it was time to go to lunch. It couldn't have worked out too well because I think we did it only 1 year. Maybe it had something to do with the cheap help. Along about this time, I think it was probably for my 10th birthday, I was given a hatchet for a present. I won't show you the scars, one on each shin, but the handle is too short and comes about to your shin. But my dad still retained his milk route at this time. And as I said, the year I was 16, he was hurt, so I had to do this route. Now, I used to go visit Mount Philo many evenings because there was a young lady working down there that I knew. And I would get home at a little late. And somebody got me up about 4:30 to go and do the milk route. And you kind of stumbled around in a daze until you took the first can out of the cooler. And the cold water ran down your front and you were wide awake for a while. I know a little bit about apples. People used to be able to buy the windfalls, or drops as we call them. I think they were $1 a bushel or something. We got paid 10 cents a bushel to pick them. And we had mountains of baskets full of drops. People came in and bought 2, 3, 4, 5 bushels to can. People did that then. And, now I don't believe you can pick apples off the ground, can you?
I think you can, but
You're not supposed to.
no, the deer spread E. coli as they go through the orchard. And one person getting sick or dying from E. coli outbreak that could be traced back to the farm. So we haven't picked a drop up for 10 years.
It's everywhere.
Not on our apples.
Well, that's about it. We, the little farm on Landon Road was, I guess you would characterize it as sort of a subsistence farm. 2 horses, 1 our own, 1 borrowed. Everything was done. I have to tell them about filling the silo. The corn binder, which you had a picture of someplace there, that bundled the corn in bundles. It was a very efficient operation. People came to help. I remember going to your place. Toss it on the wagon, take it up the cutter. What was the thing they called it?
Corn blower.
The blower. Had a conveyor belt on it and a chopper, and then a long pipe that went up into the silo, up to a hole in the roof. And people would come and help. It was a big day, everybody came and worked on it. Then a few days later, you went to somebody else's place. But I do remember we small children were told, "God damn it, get out of the way," you know, like that. There was one in particular that was always sent up into the silo to walk around and pack down the silage, which is fine. It made you feel useful, unless it was right after your smallpox vaccination, where your arm was about the size of a ostrich egg. And there was chunks of corn cob and stalk that came down got your attention. You developed some very fast footwork. But I remember Catherine Allen must have cooked a ferocious meal, and all those people showed up at your place to feed them.
Good cook.
Yeah. Well, that's about what we did up until we moved to, that's from about early 40s up till we got the orchard. And from then on, it's just ho-hum for the most part, unless you have a summer with hailstorms, which we remember.
Yep.
But fortunately, those all steered quite clear of our area here. They came down through Bill Tressler's orchard again and again, but I can recall only 1 year where we had any serious hail damage. And you probably didn't have, you probably experienced about the same.
Bill Tressler said one time after the adjusters had been out and they picked 100 apples from 20 trees or something, and they could count them all in the hail marks and how much, if this apple would have been a U.S. #1 and it's now a cider apple, that wasn't much of a loss. If it would have been a fancy and it's got 1 mark, you can still sell it as a fancy. If it's got 2 big marks, well, then it goes down to a utility. And he said, damn it, if I'd had a little more damage, I would have had to pay them.
The big problem with orchards was when it warmed up in the spring and the blossoms came out and the bees came out and all that. Then if you got a nice heavy frost or a few days of cold, wet, rain, snow, and all that, that was not good. And I think I will end it there. I'm probably running right into my wife's bedtime. Actually, there's no doubt about it.
They had written was Larrow Farm is really, I think Hobart's farm was from Hobart, from your house looking across. Yeah, so he had the wrong identification. It's right across from your house, and the train went there, and then looking up at the Robinsons.
And how do you make root beer?
You can buy extract at the store. You can still buy it. And I don't know what the recipe is, but it's awful good.
Slow down.
Extract at the store. You mix it with seltzer or something?
Good?
Mix it with seltzer?
No.
No?
Sugar and yeast.
Sugar and yeast.
Something.
The extract. Sugar, yeast, and extract.
Okay, thank you, Rod. Before I get started, I'd have to ask Rod how many times he got let off the bus early.
I thought I was finished.
Well, you looked at me when you said that, so. Unfortunately, I don't have the unique sense of history here that these two gentlemen do, because we haven't been there that long. So I'll try and fill you in on a little bit about the history of my background. My mother was born in Williamstown on the Stone Road, which is still there. Both her parents died when she was in her early teens, I guess, and both parents did, actually. And the farm that she talks about, I guess, burned in the 40s, so I never saw the barn. I just know what she talked about growing up, being on horses and doing the work with her brothers and sisters. She was out of a family of 7. There were 3 boys and 4 girls, and she's the only one left, and she'll be 94 this spring. And all her sisters and 1 brother live to be in their 90s. So hopefully I'll be around here for a while yet. My father was born in Middlesex, and a little town or a little hamlet, I'm not sure what they call it, the Shady Rill. I don't know if anyone's heard of that or not, but in the area of Middlesex and Worcester, just outside of Montpelier. And I'm not sure whether this will show or not, but this would be my father's home place. okay? And I haven't been up there for, I don't know, probably 35, 40 years. When we were younger, that's my Uncle Ed out there, and there were 4 boys in my father's family and 6 girls, so there was 10. And I only knew my Uncle Ed because the other 2 boys had passed away through accidents, I guess, in the early years. Dad was born in 1914, so, you know, that's 100 years ago. And exactly how Mom and Dad met, I don't know, for sure. While we're on that, this year would be a photo of my mother's place up in Williamstown, the home place. And as I say, the barn burned, so I never saw that. And unfortunately, the family decided that the house, they didn't want to put money in it to keep it up, and so they raised it 3 or 4 years ago. And there's nothing left there except the land still is in the family. It's on the highest point of Interstate 89, and you can see some of the land from the interstate if you're looking in the right spot. This is a picture where we had family reunion. We had them for years. Every first Sunday in August, we had family reunion where everyone got together in Williamstown on the old home place and spent the afternoon. This next photo here, I'm probably getting ahead of myself a little bit, but this here shows where I was born and brought up in Morrisville. And this is Route 100, just about 5 miles between, right between Morrisville and Stowe Village. And the barn still stands there today. Now, Mom and Dad were married in 1947. And I can't tell you, even though she may have said something about it, how they came here to South Hero. But after they were married, they came up here and rented what is known as Contentment Farm and Good Hope Farm, that barn there from a Dr. Ebenhart, who owned the place back in the 40s. My oldest sister and brother were born here on the islands. And I never thought about it till the other day, they're islanders, even though they haven't been here for a good many years. In the spring of '53, my folks moved to Morrisville and bought this place here. And that's where I was born in the fall of 1953. And I might be an islander yet, but I can't tell you for sure.
2 more years.
Yeah. Butch, my younger brother, and my younger sister Beth, we were all born in Morrisville. We stayed in Morrisville until 1965. And then we moved to Putney for a year and worked on the farm down there. And then in the summer of 1966, we came up here to vacation for a week and spent the week in July at Alan and Helen Kinney's camp over on the West Shore Road. And in that same time period, my folks, during the vacation there, spoke to both Ray and his father and lined a job up, and then we came up here the following month, August of 1966, and we've been here ever since. The early days in Morrisville, I can go back about 55 years, and then I guess my memory kind of goes downhill, but the early days I still do remember about a lot of what went on at the farm. We had, by that time, haying methods had updated some, but still we hadn't got to the, basically the small square bales and that type of thing. Most of our hay was loose, it picked up loose. It was cut with a cutter bar, and actually when we left here, I think my father took a Farmall H that he bought from Lloyd Carter down here on Route 2, and they took it over there, and that was the only tractor that we had, one tractor. And I can remember when haying, he'd go out and hitch up the mower and mow in the morning, and then he'd unhitch his mower, and then he'd rake it when it was ready to rake. And some of the older folks would remember what they used to call the New Idea hay loader. And there was actually at the Laro's, Jesse Laro, Bart, and Leslie, there was one down there in the barn that was in mint condition because they just bought it, and I'd seen it once or twice. And I guess they have since donated it to the Addison County Fuel Days, so if you wanted to see one, it's down there in their line of equipment. But anyway, we had one there on the farm, and I think this picture, I'm not sure whether it's going to come out or not, isn't exactly what we had on the farm, but it's, yeah, there you go. This is a picture, one of the earlier models of the hay loader, which didn't have any real bed to it, but it had teeth on it. You go over the windrow when it was dry, it would pick it up, and then it had arms that worked like this. And they alternated. When one was going down, the other one was coming back. And they'd walk that hay up there, and this was hitched to a wagon. And then there'd be one or two people on the wagon loading the load of hay. And we had something quite a lot more modern than this, but in Morrisville, in the barn, we go back to the picture of the of this one here. Let me have the other one, please. Okay. Yeah, this is, these are, I'm not sure whether it's my mother, but a couple of her sisters here back when they were quite young, so it goes back quite a ways. But anyway, in Morrisville, on the right-hand side of the barn there was a barn floor that you drive into, basically on ground level. Now, the hip part of the barn, from the bottom of the eaves up, was all open. The way they had crafted the roof and that type of thing, close trusses and so forth, it left the whole thing open. And most old barns that you see nowadays, and most of them still do, have the hay track that ran down through the center of it. It was either a metal rack or metal track or a wooden one. Now, the dairy barn down here at Alan Kinney's has a wooden one, basically a 4x4 or something, hitched to the ceiling up there. And you had rollers that went back and forth, and there was what they called a hay fork. You came down, and some of them were straight, and the one we had here had 4 grapples on it, and they were bent. And you push those 4 things down into a pile of hay that you had on the wagon and lock it into place. Now, most everyone that talks about haying that way today, from the old days, they remember they usually had just a rope and a team of horses or something that pulled, went across the yard and pulled that up where it hit the trolley and then went down through and they dumped it. Well, in this particular barn here, it was a mechanized system. And you had to put the tractor with the belt on it, and it was at clutch driven and everything else. And so it was continually running all the time at the speed of the belt that the tractor was driving. And the clutch, you'd kick it into place, and the rope on the drum would turn on the drum and tighten, lift it up in the air. And then once it clicked up there, you'd hear zing going down through the barn. And then at some point where you wanted to drop your hay, you stopped it, and someone had to be up in the hay mow to pull the trip rope. And all of a sudden that would let that thing go, and whoosh, the hay'd come down and dust all over the place. And that's the way we did it. But I say, we only had one tractor. So we went out and hitched up the loader, hitched up to the wagon, backed it up to the loader, got the load of hay, disconnected that, took the load of hay and put it on the barn floor, disconnected there, went over and put the tractor on the pulley and the belt and lined that up so it would stay on, and unload the hay. And we had to, and I don't know why, we only had one tractor, except probably it had something to do with economics. And the New Idea hay loader was on steel wheels. And I was talking with Butch just the other day, and I said, "Do you remember it?" And he says, "Yes, I do." there were little half-inch knobs all over the rim of that steel wheel. And so when we were kids, I mean, this was, Butch and I were 5 and 6, 4, you know, that type of thing. And everybody went to hayfield, and on the edge of the hayfield, you know, you had a hedgerow or something. And we usually started laying down with a blanket and taking a nap or something. We'd sleep in the hedgerow. But when we woke up, one of our pastimes was to follow that hay loader back and forth up and down the field and look at those little divots it had made in the ground. And when we got done, I guess we probably, you know, we got thrown on top of the hay wagon and we rode back to the barn and, you know, back and forth. But I can remember many of those instances, you know, we weren't left somewhere and didn't have a babysitter. We stayed with Mom and Dad and we went to the fields and we also worked beside them. And it's the same way that Jill and I have raised our 4 kids, you know. They were with us, they weren't with a babysitter, they were in the barn, they were helping feeding calves. And I hope they're going to have some decent memories too. But I also remember, we were talking about the picture of Ray R. Allen here earlier in the corn barn there and what Rod talked about. We sold, Mom and Dad sold the cows probably in '61, I think. I'm not sure what year it was. We kept the farm. Dad worked out, you know, he worked on the mountain in the wintertime. He drove log truck. Once we got out of the cows, we got into raising vegetables and flowers. And I think this was most of my mother's idea, but we dug a pond. We were on kind of sandy soil up there, and so in a dry year you suffered. So if we're going to raise sweet corn, we raised acres and acres of sweet corn. We had to have an irrigation system. And so we dug a pond and we bought some irrigation equipment. Neighbor farmer down the road let us borrow or rent his tractor because ours wasn't big enough to put on the pump so that we could pump and irrigate. And in the morning when corn was ready, and over there with growing conditions a little bit different than here, you hope to have corn ready by my brother's birthday, which was August 6th. And we had a month, 5 weeks or something to have corn. And lots of times after that, we, you know, in Morrisville, you'd get an early frost. But anyway, we built a farm stand. We were right on Route 100. And we sold vegetables, you know, peas and carrots, cucumbers, sweet corn. And in the morning we'd go out and we'd pick maybe 100 dozen or better sweet corn. And Dad went to Morrisville and Stowe and stopped at some of the stores and, you know, drop off. They wanted 10 dozen of corn or so. The rest of it we sold right there at the farm. We'd pick it fresh every morning, and if we ran out sometime in the afternoon, we'd go out and pick some more. But in the morning, to get ready for everything, the whole family would go out. Mom and Dad, probably Joe and Judy, would be picking the corn. They'd bring it back to the wagon. Butch and I'd sit there and count it out by the dozen and put it in the burlap bags and get it ready so Dad could take it to the store. This was at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. We did this day after day after day. The other thing we did, Mom had right there by the house a great big garden, and she had it all lined out a lot like the garden that you see in front of her place there now, just across the road here. And she had flowers, you know, snapdragons and asters and all different kinds of flowers that she raised. And we had a florist up in Morrisville, and he'd come down in the summertime and buy those flowers. The other thing we did as a project is we started growing gladiolas. And I mean, we grew gladiolas. And it was us kids' project, you know, to raise some money. And we planted them, we hoed them, we weeded them, we picked them. And the farmhouse had just like Rod was saying, downstairs, we had a down cellar. That's where we stored our wood in the wintertime. And in the summertime, we take our milk cans that we didn't use anymore, fill them full of water, and pick the gladiolas and take them down there in the cool cellar to keep them, just like a cooler. It was dark, it was cold, and they kept well. And as I say, we had a florist that would come in and buy them dozens at a time for when he was getting ready for a wedding and so forth. And so we did that, and it was just those types of things, you know. It's we were always working with Mom and Dad, and you know, you didn't watch too much TV. If you were watching TV, you know, you're doing something else. I can remember when we got rid of the cows, we had a small room where the water came into the barn. We had to keep that from freezing. So we kept one kind of a family Jersey cow. We kept a heifer with her. We kept them in there in that small closed area to keep that from freezing. And we didn't, you know, we'd given up the milking machines. We milked her by hand. And I guess probably Dad did it most of the time, but we had plenty of milk. We made plenty of butter. You know, we'd separate the cream, and nothing fancy. We'd put it in a gallon jug or something, 3/4 full, and sit there and shake it while we were watching TV. About 10 minutes later, if the conditions were right, we had butter. We had all kinds of butter. It was those types of things, you know. And then after we left Morrisville and came up here, Mom and Dad, and I guess I worked for Ray some there that first year. And then in the spring of '67, before I graduated from 8th grade, somebody said that Hank Robinson was looking for some help. So I went down and saw Hank and hired. He said, "Yeah, go ahead." So I started in my spring's vacation and worked for him for 10 years. I can remember you talking about filling the silo. Hank had a couple of silos inside of the barn, and Rod, maybe his was inside too, but they were square silos. And they were made out of, just like the old houses were, lath and plaster Paris. And one of them was square, and the other one was a little bit oblonged, or more of a rectangular type thing. And put the pipe up there, and you fill the first one, and then you pick the pipe up a little bit more, and you had enough tractor power, you blew it right across into the second one. And you know, we'd fill them that way, and I did my share of shoveling silage out of those, and plus some others too when I was younger. He talked about the ensilage, cutting the corn. I can remember doing that over in Morrisville when it's sweet corn. Rather than let it go to waste, we had a corn binder. We cut it and bound it with baling twine, small bundles on the ground. Then we had a cattle dealer in Morrisville that wanted to buy it. He came in with his truck, and we'd go through and pick it up off the ground, and he'd take it home and chop it. So I've seen a lot of changes, just like everyone else has here in agriculture over the last 45, 55 years. And you know, what the forefathers and their ancestors used to do, they wouldn't believe what we're doing today, you know. Talk about milking cows by hand, and then you go into the buckets, and then, you know, milking parlors, and now we've got robots milking cows. And the cow goes in by herself. It's all programmed, computer programmed. They prep the cow, they wash it, dry it, check for milk conditions and that type of thing. The cow's milked, they dip her again, sanitize the udder for bacteria reasons and so forth, and out the door she goes. And she has access to that 24 hours a day, and if she wants to be milked 3 or 4 times, they limit how many times they can go in, but the one robot will take care of about 60 cows. But it's about $250,000 too.
Yeah, just went down in.
How many robots do you have up there?
I don't. Yes, Malcolm?
I was thinking there, talking about the tractors back in the late 30s and stuff, and my father sold John Deere equipment for several years. I can remember him selling 3 John Deere AR tractors, which was a fair-sized tractor on steel, with a set of number 52 plows, some 8-foot harrows for $1,100. And I was selling garden tractors later on for $5,000. Pull you along.
I was up there, I fertilizer dealer here just yesterday, and it was all used equipment. He had a John Deere tractor out there, and the way it's set up, it's the new mowers. They keep changing things all the time, but there's a 10-foot wide mower on a 3-point hitch that's driven on the front of the tractor. And then there's another mower on the 3-point hitch on the back of the tractor, another 10 foot. So it's mowing 20 feet swath at a time, which is small compared to some of the stuff that's out there. But he used equipment, and he had a price tag on that package for $93,000.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions.
Yes.
How many cows do you milk now, Ted?
The freestall that we built is 200 stalls, and we just put some more cows in there, and it's overpopulated by 10%. I think we've got about 225 we're milking right now, and a double 12 parlor. And as I say, just real briefly here, I worked for Robinsons for 10 years, and in 1977 I rented Alan Kinney's place up there and started milking. And we stayed there until the year 2000 when we bought the Martell place up there and built a freestall. There's been a lot of changes, and there's going to continue to be some changes. There's changes going on in the family, and I won't get into that, but as I say, the way we harvest things and put things up, they change dramatically. And I just wanted to say, back in Morrisville, back in the 58 or 59 probably, it's like I can remember the milk cans and the coolers, and there's still some of those spread around here in town in some of the various barns. There was a push to upgrade things, and they went to the bulk tanks. And I know in Morrisville, I think it was United Farmers Co-op that we were in at the time, and they probably helped subsidize it or get it started, but they'd help the farmer put the bulk tank in. And I know we put a bulk tank inside the barn, which in an area where used to be a couple horse stalls. We remodeled it and put it in there. And when I came here at the islands, they were just doing that here in the islands, going from the cans to the bulk tanks. And when they did that, the smaller farmers had to make a decision: am I going to pay that cost, or am I going to get out? Well, there were a lot of them at that time when they got out. I know Rachel's father, Henry Robinson, quit dairying in 63, 64. It was before I got here, but Ray quit dairying in 64. Got a milk certificate here that from the Massachusetts, from Martell. They quit dairying in 65. Lombards across the road quit dairying at the same time. When I came here, Elmer Santor, he had 7 or 8 cows, just a small little farm. But he says, I want a farm. And when they made the switch, he put in a bulk tank that wasn't any bigger than a washing machine. And I'm not sure what the capacity was, but maybe 80 gallons, something like that. And he shipped milk as long as he could go. And with the help of his family, Jasper Santor and his grandkids and that type of thing, they used to hay over there on George Pigeon's farm. They used to hay that. They hayed down in back of where my parents are on the Giffords. And they hayed down in back of where Paula Santor is right now, Paula Nash, that open field down in there. And the Brownells rented that after Elmer got done, but Elmer went way up into his 80s until he just couldn't do it any longer, and he finally sold. But Winfield, Dubuque, wherever Dubuque was, there were a lot of dairies that didn't make that switch at the time. And when I started working for Hank in 67, he had the bulk tank in and he had the milk cows pretty well done, but he was still, in that spring, he was still milking into cans. But he made that switch sometime that summer to go to the bulk tank. And the other question I guess I wanted to ask Rod is where did he take those milk cans? Because there used to be the Grand Isle Creamery up there where the utility, it used to be Barron's up there by the railroad tracks on 314. That used to be the Grand Isle Creamery. But I don't know whether anyone knows or not, but before that, you had a creamery here in South Hero. And it was where Cecile Roy, or Gove, lives right now, the old Chester place. The garage down back, you know, there used to be the creamery back in the, what, 30s and 40s? Okay, I don't know when they made the switch and got done, but it, you know, South Hero Creamery locally here, they combined and went to Grand Isle Creamery, and at that time in the 60s and 70s, it was South Hero, Grand Isle, and North Hero. Elberg had their own creamery, Milton had their own creamery, and then in the early 70s, when Grand Isle Creamery decided they were going to get done, they merged with St. Albans Co-op. And I think Grand Isle Creamery was the first creamery outside of Franklin County that went with St. Albans Co-op. And then they picked up the ones up in Alberg and Isle of Mont, and then Milton Co-op, Milton Creamery, went with them after, you know, afterwards.
One more question.
Ray, do you know how many farms there were on South Street when you were younger? If I remember, when I was a kid, I think there was 13 on just South Street that had, you know, at least 4 or 5 cows, if not 15 or 20.
You count and you can tell me when I miss one. But Bob Straits, there are dairy cattle there. The Gardners had one where the school is, just where the school parking lot is. Elmer Center across the street.
Cassidy down there by the cemetery.
Okay. Yeah, the Gordons. And we're up to, you had cows on your farm, did you, one time? Where our packing house was farm. Yeah, they're the next ones up. And then we had cattle. Elmer Fletcher had milked some cows at the Stone House. The Kennys, then on the left were at the Four Corners. Frechets were milking there. And Winfield Dubuque was milking cattle. And a grandfather on the Laro farm. And the Phelpses and the Robinsons on the other side of the road.
You were in the lake.
But,
Wasn't there one on the corner of, right across from Harlow Frechette? Didn't they have cows at one time in?
I don't remember that not being part of the Kenny farm.
No, it wasn't part of the Kinney farm. No, they had cows in the basement of that barn. I remember.
It was a friend farm.
Yes.
Oh, the Friends?
Exactly, yeah, the Friends.
That I don't remember, but I'm not as old as you are, so that's...
Winona Robinson. She and her first husband lived there.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I remember when they lived there, but I didn't know they had cattle in it.
Well, they worked on the front farm off where the preacher was.
Okay. One of the things that I remember, and it was something like first 30 years of my life, or 35, the Moonies sold the inn and built a house, which is now Dave Carter's. No, that was the Freezer Lock at the house store where Connie and Jack Thompson lived. That was a new house. And the Phelpses sold what's the farm where our packing house is, that house, and built a house on Hill Road. And in 30 years, plus or minus, those were the only two houses that were built in South Hero on Hill or South Street. Give you an idea what kind of change is coming.
I might add one thing. You probably heated your house with wood or coal, right? Yeah. And no doubt you heated with wood. And I think we all know a little about cutting and splitting wood. And I forgot to mention that until I was about 14 or 15, I thought my name was Fetch Wood.
It was a lot more fun to help the neighbor's son fill their wood box than it was to fill my own, I'll tell you.
Well, you got to handle it several times. Bring it in, take out the ashes, spin it.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we all have an appreciation for farming that we never dreamed we'd have after hearing this. And I'm amazed, I asked all of you, and I didn't suggest what you would talk about very much, and yet you all had such different stories, so it's been a remarkable evening. There's some goodies. Yes.
We'll be done at 9:45.
I'd just like to say that when I started, there's 2 booklets out here that I handed around. It was put together, yes, by the Apple Institute or something here, Ag Department. And I had it open to the fruit house, which is down there on Alan Kinney's. And a lot of people ask, well, they think it's a school because of the cupola on top. But the little caption in there, Alan's grandfather, I think it was Thaddeus Kinney, built that in 1890 somewhere. I don't know exactly what the date was.
1896.
Well, it says when the illustration of that.
Oh.
Okay. But anyway, Alan's pretty proud of that. And it said there was the first cold storage. His grandfather designed that and built it. Supposedly what they call the first cold storage, where they keep the apples. And I know they store the apples downstairs in the wintertime. And, back in the 40s and 50s, Alan and nobody, I guess the apples are still staying here, but Alan would pick the apples and sort them and grade them and take them down cellar. And then in the wintertime, he'd load the station wagon up and he'd pedal them. He'd go out and drive Grand Isle, North Hero, Chittenden County somewhere, and stop at the house and pedal, a bushel or 2 apples through the winter to get rid of them. And I can remember over in Mooresville as kids, Thomas Chittenden over in Chittenden Cider Mill in South Burlington would come over to Mooresville. And that was one of the big treats. He'd have fresh cider in gallon jugs. And we'd buy 1 or 2 jugs a week when he came through, or whenever he came through, some apples and some fresh cider. And, that's just the way, things were done back then, and, how much things have changed. But it's just like a lot of the structures here in town. It's just amazing what they did with them and how they put them together. That building up there is it's just fantastic. You get the basement, first floor, and the second floor, and then there's kind of a catwalk to get up into the cupola to service that when you need to. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, please, somebody ended up with a photograph, or ended up with 2 bottle caps. Those are the only 2 we have.
They're over here. Everything's right here.
There you go, Mike.
Thank you. There are some goodies back there.
Stop by right here.
And, but first you need to take the dark blue chairs into the classroom back there. And the wooden chairs go to the classroom on the right. On the left, excuse me. I don't.
Dark blue on the right and the light blue stay here.
Okay, thank you so much. And
These are the dark blue back here. Yeah.